Welcome to my session, Make PowerShell a Real Solution in 5 Steps. My name is Heiko, and first of all, I want to thank all the sponsors of the Scottish Summit this year. It's ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proximo 3, Red Spire, Agilysys, and Hitachi Solutions. Without these sponsors, this event simply wouldn't be possible. So, thanks a lot. All right, so I'm working for a company, ScriptRunner. I'm into PowerShell and automation. And in this session, I want to talk about and show you how you can make PowerShell a real solution in 5 steps. And so this is the agenda. I want to start with talking about the potential of PowerShell. I want to also then talk about the challenges that are there when you use PowerShell in its native form. And then, of course, we're going to take a look at how to make PowerShell a real solution and how we can help you to achieve that goal. We, the ScriptRunner company, we are into PowerShell management. That's our goal. So the goal is really to simplify the way you develop, you manage, and you delegate PowerShell. And here you see part of our company. This is me. Here you also get the information how you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, on GitHub, or via email. And we are very much into the community. And one thing that we are providing, for example, is a free PowerShell poster. So if you are on your PowerShell journey, no matter if you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an expert, you might want to have this PowerShell cheat sheet poster on your office and your home office wall, because it really helps you to understand and work with PowerShell day in, day out. You can order this for free on our website and we will send this to you. And so this is really something that helps a lot of people already with their PowerShell journey and how to use PowerShell. All right, talking about the potential of PowerShell at step 1. So PowerShell itself, of course, is a great technology. It's been here for quite some time. It started in 2006 and it's everywhere in the Microsoft landscape, in all Microsoft products. So it's a great command line solution. It's a great scripting language for IT automation. You can automate and standardize all your recurring tasks throughout the whole set of Microsoft solutions. And the nice thing about that, it's not only about the Windows environment anymore. As you might know, now with PowerShell 7, it's also support for Linux and Mac OS. So this really gives you a great opportunity if you learn PowerShell, not just to use that on all the Windows platforms, but also on Linux and Mac OS, which I think is great. And then it's also not just Microsoft who is committed to PowerShell and providing support for this, but we also see many other vendors supporting PowerShell. And then, last but not least, we have a very vital worldwide community around PowerShell. People who are willing to help you with PowerShell if you have questions. And so if you're looking at the PowerShell ecosystem, that we have the support from Microsoft, we have the support for a lot of major vendors. And then, of course, there is the community who also provides a lot of great tools and great modules that you can work with when you're using PowerShell. So if you're not have started using PowerShell, I think now is the right time to really start and using PowerShell and start your automation journey with PowerShell. So it's really a great platform. But of course, it also comes with some kind of challenges when we look at how PowerShell works and what it can provide. So that's going to be something I want to talk and cover as well. Depending on where you are on your automation journey, no matter if you're on the beginner level, if you're an intermediate, or if you're already an expert ninja PowerShell scripter, there are always questions coming up like, where to start, how to learn, how to standardize, how to manage scripts, how to handle the credentials that are necessary to run scripts against your backend systems, no matter if it's on premises, if it's in the cloud, or if it's hybrid. And so what I want to focus on is really the parts here more on the right side, where we assume that, okay, you already have started to play around with PowerShell, maybe wrote a few scripts and familiar with the command line. And what we experience quite a lot is then, if we look at the landscape and how PowerShell is being used, we quite often see kind of a situation like we see on the picture here, where you have a lot of scripts, a lot of tools somewhere, and the people who have created it, they know exactly where to go to if they want to do something like spinning up a new VM, creating new users, starting an onboarding process or whatever. But it's like always the question, like, where is the latest version? Where is the script actually stored? Is it in an email? Is it in a network share? So it's typically kind of a very, very, let's say, decentralized approach. And the second thing that we see here quite often is really a know-how bottleneck when it comes to how to use PowerShell. And my experience is, no matter how big an organization is, you have maybe a handful of people who are really very much into PowerShell, who are the experts. But outside of this expert circle, it really becomes difficult to find people who are using PowerShell and having a deeper knowledge. And what we also see is that when we look at the use of PowerShell, of course, you need to have you need credentials to connect to your backend system. And typically, this is something that you have either stored somewhere locally, maybe encrypted, and then you think about, okay, I have to give this script to somebody else. How can I do it? How can I do it in a secure way? Because I don't want to give these people my credential, for example. So by default, there is no really org-wide secure credential management in PowerShell. And that really leads to the fact that if you're using PowerShell, it's typically really the expert circle. It's like the high priest in the magic circles of PowerShell and automation. And from our perspective, this really means that the potential that we have in PowerShell, doing so many great and different things with it, this potential really remains untapped throughout the organization. And we think that there is a lot that you can do with PowerShell and help your whole organization to use PowerShell to automate and standardize. So let's think about how this PowerShell landscape and infrastructure should look like, so you can really use it as something not just for the IT experts, but really something that helps your complete organization. And that brings us to the third part here of the agenda, talking about how to make PowerShell a real solution in 5 steps, how to unlock the full power and potential of PowerShell in your organization. And so what we think is important, that we're changing the landscape from what we saw before, like there is these tools and these scripts everywhere, and the experts know how to use it and where they are, and then you have, let's say, the outsiders who are not really involved in all that. And so what we think is important is really to standardize the whole process and the way that you write scripts, the way that you're using them, to make sure everybody works with the latest version, with the right version of a script, no matter what use case it is, creating a new user, spinning up a VM, creating new teams, something like this. And one key aspect from our perspective really is centralization, to really bring all the different bits and pieces that are necessary to use PowerShell successfully, to bring this into a central place. And that also means that it has to be easy. It has to be easy for people who are non-IT experts to work with that. And maybe even for people who don't even know that PowerShell exists, but in the background, PowerShell is doing its thing, but it's just about getting the job done when it comes to the use case. And so you could say, okay, one of the goals is really to change something that is very technical, like this script here, into something that you can maybe even integrate into an existing self-service portal and make use of this. So here we see an example for an out-of-office management for Office 365. So if you look on the right side, this is just an input form somewhere on a website. So a person who is using this really don't need to know anything about PowerShell. And that's one of the key things that we see to really untap the potential of PowerShell in your organization. So this is really, it has to be easy. That's an important thing. And then of course, if we think about having people in helpdesk, maybe even end users, working with the solution, then of course it's important to have monitoring capabilities so that you know which script ran at what time, how long did it take, was there an issue with connecting to a particular backend system and stuff like that. And another important aspect really is to have a way to integrate this whole PowerShell solution and PowerShell technology into your whole infrastructure and your workflows and your processes, which, for example, could mean that you have maybe a workflow system, you have a monitoring system, ServiceNow, SAP, SharePoint workflows, whatever, and they should be enabled to also trigger PowerShell scripts in a centralized, in a well-organized way. And taking all this into account really means that having all that really is, if you reach that goal, it's really, you have a solution, or you really make PowerShell a real solution, as we call it. And and the question is, how do we achieve this? And it all starts with the scripts and the modules. So what we are doing when we are thinking about using PowerShell together with ScriptRunner, we are centralizing all the scripts, we're centralizing all the modules, which also means you could, of course, synchronize that with your GitHub repos or TFS or Azure DevOps. And if you now say, okay, I don't even have scripts at the moment to start my automation journey, we have some good news here, because we are actually providing hundreds of free ready-to-use scripts on our GitHub repo. So if you go to github.com/scriptrunner/actionpacks, there are hundreds of scripts for many different platforms, for Office 365, for Azure, for Active Directory, for Exchange, for VMware. And you can just take them, use them together with ScriptRunner or just natively on the command line. And it really helps you to see, okay, what is possible with PowerShell. It might even give you some inspiration about, okay, these are things that I haven't thought of, where I can use PowerShell. And it really is a good starting point if you're on the journey and using PowerShell. And centralizing the modules is also important, because you only have to maintain these modules in a single place on the ScriptRunner server, and you could start, let's say, delegating VMware tasks without thinking about, okay, does this guy have the PowerCLI module installed? That's not necessary, because it's managed centrally in ScriptRunner. Talking about how the credentials are managed, it's of course centralized, and there are two ways to manage this credential, and I will show you that in the demo, how that actually works. So one thing is they are stored in the local Windows credential store, and the other way is bringing password servers into the picture. So at the moment we support 3 password servers: CyberArk, Pleasant, and Psychotic, which means if there is a script that needs to connect and establish a PowerShell session to your Exchange server, to your Azure subscription, or to your Office 365 tenant, ScriptRunner is going to request the information in real time from your password server, and then using it to establish this connection, which means there is no credential stored locally at all. And if you have things in place like password rotation or other things that password servers typically offer, then of course that's something that we can make use of as well, and we always have the right information. And it's also of course interesting if we think about having multiple instances of our solution, so you don't want to maintain that on each and every box. You have it centralized, and that's really an even more secure way of using PowerShell. And talking about security in general, another thing that of course is always important is the security aspect of how to use PowerShell. And there again, some good news. We have a free ebook around PowerShell security. It's 140 something pages, and it covers all the built-in security features in PowerShell, and it really helps you to make sure you use PowerShell in the most secure way possible. So I can also only encourage you to register for this ebook. You get this PDF, and again, it's something that really I think helps your automation journey with PowerShell. All right, so we have the credential part, and one very important aspect of our solution is, if I'm zooming in here, that together with ScriptRunner, the only instance that actually runs the script is a ScriptRunner server, which means only the ScriptRunner server needs to have access to the backend system. No matter if it's on-premise, if it's in the cloud or hybrid or whatever, it's only ScriptRunner running the scripts, connecting to the backend system, needs to have access to the credentials. And that really means that that's why we call it here the execution proxy. It's something, it's centralized, managed. ScriptRunner executes the scripts. And if we think about delegation and enabling people in helpdesk, service desk, and end users, here on the left side, these people are talking to ScriptRunner, and based on the delegation within ScriptRunner, you decide what these users are able to do. Which means these users don't have to have any access to the backend system, and of course they don't need to have any privileged permissions in this backend system. And that really makes the whole solution very secure, very easy to start the delegation. Because the users really don't have to have, as I said, any access to the backend system. They don't need to have any privileged permissions, and you have the full control about all these activities. And because we talk about people who are typically not into PowerShell, not on the command line, it has to be easy. And what we are doing here as well is we are automatically transform your PowerShell scripts into a web UI without any additional coding. So we're looking at the synopsis, we're looking at the parameter blocks, and creating, for example, something like this, what we see here, which is a use case for creating a new Microsoft team. And if you're maybe familiar with this new team commandlet from Microsoft, you might know that there are actually dozens of parameters coming with this commandlet. Now we're only seeing 3: the name of a team, the description, and the member of the teams. And what happens in the background is all the different components, all the different parameters. For example, do you want to allow GIFs? Are there going to be private or public channels? Who's going to be the owner? All these security settings, all these guidelines that your organization wants to use, they are pre-configured and they are just hidden from the user. So what happens here is really the user only has to concentrate on the things that really needs the attention of a user. And everything else is predefined. It's going to be used when ScriptRunner is executing the scripts, but it's nothing that we have the user to confront with. And that, again, of course, makes it very, very easy to work with that solution. And if you look at this input form, it's really like, okay, this person doesn't have to know anything about PowerShell, because it's really just input for particular information, and everything else is managed by ScriptRunner. And then based on that, you can decide what kind of use cases you want to delegate to your users. And so in this case here, each tile represents such a use case, and it can be for on-premises, it can be in the cloud, It could be like in this case, we have like 6 delegations, maybe for other users it's going to be more or less, or it's going just, you start with a couple of use cases, then you add use cases over time. In some cases, really, the helpdesk people become the driving force of asking the IT guys, couldn't you start to delegate more use cases to us so we can make our job better? We don't have to bother you IT guys to ask for creating a user or changing group memberships or stuff like that. And so this is how that really can grow in your organization. And then as the last step, so besides the fact that these actions could be triggered by somebody in helpdesk or an end user, the third one, of course, the second one, of course, could be a schedule process where you want to take all your housekeeping processes and centralize them instead of using these decentralized Windows task scheduler. Of course, that's something that you can do with ScriptRunner as well. And the third way would be really to enable other systems to talk to ScriptRunner to trigger the execution of scripts. So, for example, if there's a monitoring system detects an issue in the sensor detects an issue, and then the solution is to run a particular script, and then this monitoring system triggers ScriptRunner telling us, run this script, these are the parameters, and please let me know if everything was successful. Or if there was something wrong, so the monitoring system knows what happened while ScriptRunner was trying to execute the script. And that could be, as I said, monitoring systems, it can be workflow systems, any kind of system actually that's RESTified can make use of ScriptRunner. And the nice thing, even if you have systems that already support PowerShell in one way or another, typically it's like really decentralized, where you have to think about where are the scripts, how to handle the credentials. With ScriptRunner, you have this centralized PowerShell hub for all the PowerShell activities. And I think that's really a very, very great way of using PowerShell and really, as we say, really make PowerShell a real solution for your whole organization and not just something that is going on somewhere in the and being used only by the IT experts. Okay, so before we switch to my demo environment, just sum up this way how we actually execute scripts. So there are 3 ways: manually, scheduled, and fully automatic, which means there is for the manual approach, there is a user interaction based on browser applications. The second one is really to have some time control tasks, where I already said it's typically something for housekeeping processes. And then you have the automatic approach, where third-party systems can trigger the execution depending on what happened on that side of the third-party system. And because we're talking about a generic REST API, every system that is RESTified can use it. And even if you have systems that are not RESTified, we also have an email inbound connector, which is another way of triggering the execution of scripts. Okay, so with this, I would like to switch to my demo environment and show you a little bit around so you can get a good idea about how that all works. Environment, and as I mentioned before, it all starts with the script. So here I'm in our admin app, and here I have access to all the scripts, and I can use tagging to find only my scripts for Azure, for example, or only my scripts for Exchange. And so this filter really helps to, especially if you have a bigger number of scripts and other objects later on. We also detect if a script contains functions, which means later on you could decide if you maybe only want to work and delegate a particular function of a script or maybe the full functions. We also kind of detect if there are some errors in the script, like in this case. So if this something happens here, we detect this as well. And depending again on your PowerShell journey, you might say, okay, how to get these 1,000 something scripts here. And the thing is, most of these scripts I haven't written myself. Many of them, actually almost all of them, are coming from our action packs, which I mentioned earlier. in this session. So if you go to github.com/scriptrunner/action packs, you find hundreds of scripts for platforms like Office 65, like Azure, VMware and stuff like that. And it really helps you to number one, again, maybe depending on where you are on your journey, how PowerShell works, how we provide and how we develop the script. So we have a synopsis, we have param descriptions. You see, we are also supporting multi-language, which you don't have with native PowerShell, of course. And so this really is helpful to get an understanding about how this all works, and also to get an idea maybe about the use cases that you could start with. And we are always updating this action packs, because Microsoft also changes and is adding new functionality to their modules. Just recently there was some adding for Office 65, where you can now also maintain and manage the analytics settings, and so it's something that's really updated frequently, where you can take a look at once in a while to see if there are new possibilities, and of course you can synchronize this is with ScriptRunner. This is what I did here. So it starts with the script. That's step one. Step two, we need the credentials, and the credentials can be stored in two ways. One, as I mentioned, they can be stored locally in the Windows Credential Store, or like in this case for my local Exchange server, I have a Pleasant password server running, and whenever I have a script that needs to connect to Exchange, I will, or not I, but ScriptRunner will connect to Pleasant, take the ID of this credential and ask for this information in real time. Which means, of course, no credential information is stored in any kind of script. This is one very, very important aspect of having this centralized management solution for PowerShell. You don't need to use any kind of credential information in your scripts, which also means you're simplifying the way you script, because you can really just concentrate on the use case. And the next step is we talk about targets, and targets are the actual backend system that we want to talk to with PowerShell. And here again, I have my local Exchange server. So the question is, okay, where do I want to connect to? So here I have the FQDN of my Exchange server, and here that's the credential that's being used later on whenever there is a use case where the connection to Exchange is necessary. Which also means that using these target technologies here, you don't need to have any import module commandlets in your scripts anymore, because we're taking care of importing and starting and using the right modules, which is even more true if we think about, for example, Office 65, where again, of course, there is a credential to connect to your target, to your Office 65 tenant, and of course it could be multiple tenants as well. So because you can create an unlimited number of targets actually, and then it's about what kind of endpoints, what kind of services you would like to work with this target. It's going to be Exchange. Are you going to use Exchange v2? Maybe you already have switched to a certificate-based authentication, which we support here, or you want to have it. You want to have connections to your Microsoft Teams. So this is something, again, you're centralizing here and managing here. And of course, later on, nobody needs to know about when they're using that functionality. They don't need to know how to connect and where to connect. It's just something that you configure here. And as I said, you can create an unlimited number of targets for local execution, for PowerShell remoting, which also means, of course, we support PowerShell 7 if you would like to establish connections to Linux, Mac OS using SSH. No problem. We can also combine targets into collections, and that's quite interesting, because especially for housekeeping processes, you can say, okay, every weekend I need to archive and maybe delete log files on all my Windows servers, and then you can just say, okay, I'm combining this into one collection, and then this collection is being used, and ScriptRunner is working on each and every backend system to do whatever is configured in your scripts and to fulfill these housekeeping processes. So we have the scripts, we have credentials, and we have targets. And with this, we can create what we call actions. And that's the use case. And if I'm coming back to the one that we saw in the slide, which was about teams, I would like to show you this first, how that looks like, which is this creating a new team based on company guidelines, which is something where we see these 3 parameters available. And this is still the view of the administrator. I'm going to switch to a person in helpdesk or an end user and to show you how that looks like. Now here we automatically create this input form. And so the description here comes directly from the script, which means if you make changes to the script, it takes effect immediately. We also see that obviously we have 2 parameters who are mandatory. That's why we have this, they are in red here. So we have to do something here in order to start that process. And let's make an example here. And so the description is obviously it's optional, and then it's about selecting the members, which could be all the users, or maybe I'm just selecting 3 of them. And so this is something, as you see here, of course, I don't want to type the name of the users. This drop-down list is something that we provide as well. I can click on OK, and now in the background, ScriptRunner is executing this script, and together with all the information, I can click on this lower right corner here, and I can see in real time what's actually happening in the background. And later on, we can also see the result of the whole process. So what I want to show you while that's still running is how that looks if we switch to the edit mode, because here we see that this new team commandlet consists of many, many different parameters, which we didn't see when we started this action. And that's because these things have been configured, like what's the visibility here, public or private. And then we say, okay, we hide this parameter from input form, which means it's still there. So if ScriptRunner executes the script, it's being used, but it's nothing that we have to bother the user with, because it's our default setting for how we want to work with that in our organization, and that's pre-configured. In this case, we even have a pre-configured set of channels that we configure when we create this team. And here we also see that we display the list of users that I was able to pick. This is quite interesting because based on these queries, you could decide that maybe somebody is able to select from all your users, but maybe some other person in helpdesk or in a line of business, they are only seeing their users of their teams or their region or their office, for example. And again, this doesn't happen in the script. The script stays exactly the same. It's just something that you add and manage within ScriptRunner based on what the user is able to select. And that's a great thing because number one, people are not, there are no typing errors. And the second thing is you really can manage what information should be visible here. And that's really a great thing. So another, and so if you have configured this action, so what you can of course do then say, okay, I as an administrator, I have configured this action, everything is fine. And now I want my helpdesk users and my maybe end users I want them to consume this action. And based on the delegation within ScriptRunner, this person is able to start all these tasks that we see here. And so one is this same that we just saw in the admin context, which is creating a new team. And we see the same input information. Of course, it's simplified, so there is no parameter information because that's not necessary for this kind of people. But we have the same input, and I'm going to have another sample here, I'm selecting the members, and I'm starting this action here. And so this is really just, as you see, a very simple web application. And so it's really nothing that the user should know about PowerShell or something like this. And as I said, based on our dashboard, because ScriptRunner is the instance that executes the script, we have all the information about what's going on. So in this case, we can even see in real time that there is this user Tina, and she started this creating of team process, and we see the parameter input. We also see what has been added additionally by the default settings in the background. And so all the information about these activities are visible here. And no matter, like in this case, it's a manual approach, we can see the tasks and the information, if it's a scheduled one or if it would have been triggered by the REST API. All this information ends up here in this dashboard. And if we're thinking about automation, of course, you as an administrator, you maybe even would like to see, okay, what do we gain by automating with PowerShell and with ScriptRunner? And so what we can provide here is a efficiency dashboard that calculates the time and money that you save by automating your tasks with PowerShell and ScriptRunner. And so for each task, you can configure what is the time that you saved for each process. So you could say, okay, there is a process and I'm saving 10 minutes compared to the manual approach. And you can also configure what kind of hourly wage is fitting to your organization, and that gives you a nice overview about the time and the cost that you saved by automating. And then of course you can export that and maybe send it to your management and stuff like that. So that really, I think, gives you a very good way of kind of being transparent about why actually automating in the first place. So what are we gaining as an organization? Coming back to this use case that we just saw. So one thing would be, okay, a user is actually working with our user interface. Another process could be, another way of using it is, you might want to integrate that into your into a self-service portal, for example, that is already existing. And so instead of using our user interface and to logging in there, it could be part of an existing self-service portal, and the information that is necessary to fill in, you have the same information that we just saw. It's coming with the same look and feel of this website. So it becomes even more easy for people to work with that. And again, it really depends on the use case. So it also could be spinning up a new VM in Azure, for example, where you want to make sure people can only select the allowed regions that are okay with your organization and only the VM sizes that you want to allow these people to spin up. So to avoid that they start the biggest possible and the most expensive VMs, for example. So this makes it even more and even easier to really say, okay, this is if somebody is working with something like this, what we see here, no user needs to know anything about PowerShell. It's really something that we completely hide. We are managing everything in the background, and that's it. The same is true for the scheduled approach, which I also want to show you quickly, where, as I mentioned earlier, besides the fact that somebody, like what we just saw with an example, somebody clicks on a tile and starts a process, the other one could be a scheduled process. And here, for example, I have a scheduled process where I'm synchronizing scripts from a GitHub repo every hour. But in other cases, you might have a daily task, or maybe something that only should happen on weekends and stuff like that. If you're having the scheduled approach, you also can activate the email notification, for example, so you know that something goes, if something went wrong, for example. So this is the second part of really using this whole schedule part and getting rid of this decentralized Windows task scheduling settings. And the third one really would be to use our automation connectors to allow other systems to talk to ScriptRunner and to trigger automatically the execution of scripts. Okay, before moving back to the presentation, just as an example, so here you see what kind of information you can provide to a user once a task is fulfilled. Like in this case, we decided that, okay, if a team is created, we display all the different parameters, which could be fine in this case. If you want to have a more simplified information, it's really up to you what you want to present to the end user or to the people in helpdesk, so they know, okay, the job has been done and everything is fine. Okay, so just to sum up what we covered, what I showed you is really with PowerShell together with ScriptRunner, you can really enable and use all this PowerShell functionality that you have in its native form in the technology itself with all the backend functionality, and really make it something that the admins can work with, DevOps people, developer, helpdesk people, and end user can make use of that. And that really is a very, I think, important aspect of really saying, okay, with this we can unlock the potential of PowerShell across your organization, because the administrator, they can delegate recurring tasks and save time for other things. The helpdesk people are becoming more happy because they can deliver more and better services in less time. With the self-service functionality, end users themselves can solve issues and trigger tasks. The developers of script, of course, broaden the audience of the great stuff that they maybe already have written, and it's something that the whole organization can make use of. And the DevOps people find a really secure, well-organized environment to make sure all the scripts are based on the standardized approach in your organization, and they are used in a secure way. And of course, from a company perspective, the whole organization becomes, of course, more productive in this context. Now, if you like what I showed you in this session, you might want to have some hands-on experience yourself. So you can download our software from our website. It's a 30-day free license, fully functional, and you can just play with it in your own environment. If you want to talk about your individual use cases, infrastructures, I'm always happy to have individual sessions. You can just book a demo session with me on our website. Use the QR code here as well. And so with this, I would like to say thank you for attending my session. I hope I could show you a little bit around and show you what kind of potential really lies in this PowerShell technology and how we with ScriptRunner can help to achieve as much as possible with this great technology together with the community. And if you haven't started to use PowerShell, I really would encourage you to start now, because automation is really key for successful administration. And it will become even more important. All right, just as a last information as well, this session recording will be available on the YouTube channel of the Scottish Summit within, I think, the next 2 weeks. So you can always go back and watch this session again. And yeah, as I said, thanks again for attending my session, and keep on scripting. Thanks.